Yeah, I don't necessarily think this is new. I remember writing about this in 2010. I had a book that came out at that time called The Collaborative Organization. And I think the book came out in 2012, but I was writing about this stuff in 2010. So, long before. And we've been talking about multiple generations in the workforce for a long time. So I don't think that the idea of multiple generations at work is necessarily new, and I think it's going to continue going forward. But for me, I look at it oftentimes in terms of life stages, right? In other words, just because you're younger or older doesn't automatically mean that you think a certain way or you want to work a certain way. There are some older people who don't want to show up to the office. There are some younger people who do want to show up to the office. There are some older people who are great with technology. There are some younger people who are not great with technology. So it's a really big mix mash of different things. I prefer to just think of it as how do you work with different types of people, which is basically what work is about. I think overall we're doing a pretty good job, right? I mean, it's just kind of the nature of life. It's the nature of work. You're always going to have people who are different ages, different perspectives, different generations, different cultures, different backgrounds. It's part of being a human being. It's part of living in today's world, is knowing how to navigate that environment. But I think there's always going to be challenges with anything and everything. I learned something absolutely insane today. 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed. Are you one of those people? Please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. It'll take you 1 second. It helps me a lot, and you'll get access to more videos just like this one. But it's funny because if you look throughout history, I remember for millennials, they used to call millennials, the me generation. But then they also said that about the generation prior, all right? And now we're saying that about Generation Z. So it's hard. I mean, I'm more concerned today not with a generational thing, but with more of a general, broader work ethic thing. And so it's not necessarily generational, but I see a lot of opportunity in today's world for people who are willing to work harder and make sacrifices. I'm just not sure we're seeing as many people today who are willing to work harder and make those sacrifices. So that's sort of the stuff that I'm more concerned with. I put out a video fairly recently on the top 8 leadership trends of 2024. And one of them is work ethic, which I perceive to be in somewhat of a decline compared to previous years post-pandemic, because a lot of people, we were given free money. A lot of people don't want to show up to the office anymore. A lot of people want to make more money. A lot of people want equity in the business. They want more, and they want to do a little bit less. And that to me is a concern. And I think we're seeing the pendulum start to swing in the opposite direction, where we're going to rebalance those things out a little bit. So that's more of what I'm concerned with. If we were to think specifically about generations, I think the younger generation, specifically Gen Z, they are obviously more frequent users of some social platforms like TikTok. And there are some things on TikTok that irritate the bejesus out of me, where when I see some of these videos, I'm like, I just hope that people are not paying attention to this. Things like lazy girl jobs, Sunday scaries, Monday morning blues. There are all these trends of social media influencers going on TikTok saying, here's how you can get a job where you do the least amount of work, but you can still get paid. Or here's a job where you can just kind of coast and be lazy and act like you're working, but really not be working and still get paid. Like that stuff I think is toxic. That stuff I think is a killer for anybody who watches it, because it sets you up long-term for pure failure. And so those are some things that I'm concerned with. It's hard to say it's generational because, the younger generation is more consuming that content, but I also know there are a lot of younger employees who are willing to work extremely hard. So that's why it's tough to pin, is it a generation? It's more like the people who are consuming that content and then taking action on that content. So I think that some of the messages that we are delivering and that social media influencers are delivering on those platforms is far more hurtful than it is helpful for anybody looking for a job. I think we need to remember what the purpose of an organization is, Right? I mean, you get hired to do a job. An organization is not a charity. An organization is not your friend. An organization doesn't want to pay you just for the sake of paying you. An organization has real challenges that it's looking to solve. It has customers. It has deadlines. It has projects. You get hired because basically you're saying, hey, I can help you achieve those goals. And the company is saying, great, we'll pay you to help us achieve those goals. And ideally, we'll treat you well and you'll stay here for a while as long as you are able to be at that level of competency. And I think sometimes we forget that at the very core is the nature and the relationship of a business. Now, of course, businesses have changed over the past few decades, where today an organization is also responsible for things like well-being and health and financial literacy. We get a lot of purpose and meaning, friendships from work. So of course, work is an integral part of life, but it's not to say that your level of competence as an employee can decrease while you still expecting those same things. So I think any organization at any time needs to evaluate, are the people that we have working here doing the job that they should be doing at the level that they should be doing it? And if not, then we should be figuring out what steps we should be taking. It's one of the themes that I talked about in my recent book on leading with vulnerability. I think for the past few years, we've been a little over-indexed on vulnerability, which by itself, it's not that vulnerability is bad, but vulnerability is about exposing a gap that you have. A gap in intelligence, a gap in experience, a gap in emotion, a gap in whatever it might be. But you're basically saying, I need help. I don't know how to do something. I'm struggling. And for a long time, I think for the past few years, we're using that as a crutch to justify poor performance. The idea of leading with vulnerability is about exposing a gap that you have, but demonstrating what you're trying to do to close the gap. So in other words, hey, I'm really sorry I made a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking, but I screwed this project up and I just wanted to tell you. That's vulnerability. Leading with vulnerability is saying that, but then adding, but here's what I learned from the mistake, and here are 3 things that I'm going to do going forward to make sure that that never happens again. I think we need to, especially this year and beyond, to focus more on adding the leadership piece to the vulnerability, right? Because in a work environment, it's a different dynamic. You have, again, employees, customers, managers, you're being paid a salary. If you keep showing up to work talking about the gaps that you have, at a certain point, people are going to look at you and say, well, what are you doing here? Right? If you only talk about the things that you can't do, if you're always talking about that you need help, then this probably isn't a good fit. So we need to get to a point where we're giving employees more accountability, more responsibility, more power and agency and authority to say, yeah, I did mess up, but here's what I'm going to do about it. I do need help, but here are some ideas that I have on how I'm going to solve my problem going forward. I'd love to get your insight on that. Right? It's sort of like if you have a friend who says, yeah, I'm trying to lose weight. And you say, great, what are you doing about it? Are you going to the gym? Are you eating healthy? Are you going for walks with your dog? Are you fasting? What are you doing to solve that problem? Same thing is true at work. Hey, I made a mistake. Well, that's great. What are you doing about it? And so I think this is a very, very important thing that we need to be focusing on for 2024. So